Welcome to the Growing Older with Enthusiasm podcast. I'm Dr. Ron Kaiser, and we are now running the series on winning in overtime, helping individuals to maximize those great years of life that occur in life's second half century. And when we get to overtime, we want to be able to win. But getting there is real important. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Neil Haley, who hopefully has some questions for me about that.
Well, I have, and you've been an absolute inspiration to me, Dr. Ron. When we first met, and I was talking about how I was before we started working together, I'm trying to work on reverse aging, and I had no idea. Like I was just starting to eat healthy. I was starting to exercise and look at my body and try to make sure that I do the proper things. Because what I was doing for my first 45 years of life, I'm 51 now, is let my body just fall apart. Okay. And after my days in professional wrestling, getting to 300, 310 pounds, which at 6'10 frame, that doesn't sound bad, but allowing my health to deteriorate in multiple ways at a very, very young age. And the reason I was doing that is because I was burning the candle at both ends. I wasn't looking at getting the proper amount of sleep, and I wasn't paying attention to my body. So this is the perfect story with you today about I wouldn't even have gotten to overtime unless I made specific changes at the age of 49 years old. So Dr. Ron, what are your thoughts? And I know that's kind of where our topic is today.
Sure. And you ought to be real pleased and proud of yourself because essentially what you were doing is, if we can use a sports analogy, if you fall behind 6-0 in the second or third inning of life, or if you fall behind 21-0 in the first quarter of a football game, doesn't mean it's impossible to turn it around and to win. It's just a whole lot harder. So whenever you catch your behavior pattern in a that's going in a negative way, it's real important. We now have the science, we now have principles to enable us to effectively make it to overtime. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
All right, so let's go ahead and go with this. How can we win it, get to overtime, Dr. Ron?
I think it all starts with the mindset. We have to expect that overtime is going to be a great time of life. Great athletes thrive in overtime. Think of Michael Jordan, who wouldn't you want the ball in his hands during overtime? And I'm sure he wanted it in his hands too. You know, the great people, the great athletes, the great accomplishers in almost any time of life look forward to what's happening down the road. They don't rest on their laurels, they keep moving forward. So the recognition that we're not going to reach this point and then we're going to drop off the cliff and suddenly we retire, we fall apart physically, mentally, and just wait around for the end. Uh, you don't do that and win in overtime. So I like to talk about growing old early, start growing old early, to begin to recognize that overtime is going to be just a period of life when we're going to be successful. And what can we do to be successful? Now, one of the early motivational speakers, Jim Rohn, said, "You can't hire somebody to do your push-ups for you." And, that applies to so many things. If you're going to build in an exercise program, build it in rationally at a level that you can do, but build it in. You can't hire somebody to sleep for you. You can't say that in essence, if I only have time for 5 hours of sleep, but I'll hire somebody to do the other 2 hours. I don't have time to eat lunch because of my busy schedule. I'll pay somebody to eat lunch nutritiously for me, and I'll just grab fast food or candy bar or something like that. So I guess the two guiding principles, one, the mindset that says that overtime is a time when I'm going to thrive. And number two, to recognize I don't start thriving in overtime unless I've prepared myself for it. That's where my non-negotiable four come in. I think it's a lifelong commitment to number one, healthy eating, number two, owning your body through things like exercise, sleep, and meditation. Number three, to keep your brain active. And that means in a variety of settings, not just in work, because if you retire from work or if you lose your job, then what have you got left if the only academic pursuits that you've done has been involved with work? And number four, to be socially connected with people from multiple generations.
And see, that's the point is people all ages need to look at these areas, right? Because you're right. If you retire in a job, like let's give you the example of a professional athlete, they really can't continue to play that till overtime. They can't. So they are going to have to develop a new skill set. Military as well, Dr. Ron. They can't be in the military till 85 years old. They're going to have to at one point retire. And what are they going to do? So looking at specific skill sets and having a balance in all four areas of which you teach is so important to win in overtime.
Right. And I think one of the things that people may forget is there are some rule changes sometimes in overtime. You know, in football, you start with different rules. You may start with the ball on the 40. In baseball, you have a runner on second base when you get into extra innings. So there are some rule changes, one of which is the fact that you don't have to be great at everything that you do. I know some of us have pursued greatness in our field and have some kind of standard that, you know, keeps us going. We may not achieve greatness, but we have that as a goal. But there are other things that we have to maintain as part of our overall planning, that keeping busy, having some meaning and purpose in your life, even if it doesn't mean going to a job full time, is important. Having friendships that may seem less important when you've got associates at work, you've got a family to take care of, um, but you know everybody else is going to develop their own pattern of living over time, and it's critical that you maintain your own friendships outside of the ones that you kind of must have. You may pursue more in the area of spirituality, volunteer work, things that enable you to meet all the non-negotiable four, but maybe not in the same way as you did uh, at other times in your life. So that, you know, winning in overtime involves adjusting to the rule changes, and the people who can adjust, just like Darwin said, and has been proven over time, people who can adjust to change are the people who learn to master it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of, kind of delve into when are we really not going to be winning overtime? What areas, especially because you are a psychologist that's gone through talking to all ages of life, when you start seeing men and women in their 40s, where do you see that they could be not winning in overtime, being able to get to overtime?
Well, that's the big concern, is getting to overtime, because while we emphasize winning in overtime, the fact is that you build your base of habits uh, much before you get to overtime. Again, if the game ends 50-0, and you're losing, you didn't get to overtime. If you get to overtime with multiple medical conditions, you know, you have no basis for winning in overtime unless you make some really great changes. If you haven't maintained friendships or maintained interests with people, you know, then you likely will not make it to overtime in a maximum way. I think the easiest places to start, because it's totally dependent on yourself, is the area of physical activity, movement, exercise, and so on. Whether you do it or not, doesn't require a boss, doesn't require somebody giving you approval. Whether you're going to eat healthy or not, uh, does not give you, does not require a boss or somebody else's approval. So I think a good judgment along the way is, number one, am I experiencing multiple preventable medical conditions? And many medical conditions really are tied to stress or poor eating or things that are totally preventable. So am I dealing with multiple conditions? They're not likely to get better over time because of the fact that if you haven't strengthened your body, paradoxically, that increases the chances of multiple medical conditions. If you are one of the people in this country, of the majority of people in the United States who are overweight or obese, they're overweight and obesity has no meaning unless we assign meaning to it. In other words, it's only bad because it's bad for you, and if you don't recognize early that that enhances the chances of you not living a full or complete life, uh, then you're not going to be motivated to interrupt that process. Just like, again, looking around and saying, it's 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. It's a whole lot harder to turn it around, but I can turn it around. If we get to overtime and it's 21-0 or 54-0, then we have to, work a lot harder to get into a different game, perhaps uh, trying more for the seniors game or the you know taking part in a walk rather than a 5K run or things of this nature. It all can be done, but it's a lot harder if you come to overtime without the healthy body.
No, no doubt. And if you do come with a healthy body, you're in such better process. But as you see in this country, that's the biggest issues that we're dealing with is obesity at very younger ages now. Many multiple medical conditions, where you basically have to be on many different pharmaceutical drugs. There's a lot of issues, and that's probably where you'll take your take at 30 or 40 years old. If you're on multiple medications, if you're going with a lot of health issues, and you are not taking care of yourself, you better now start working so that you can make it to overtime.
And I want to put in a plug for physicians and nurse practitioners and other healthcare providers who are wellness oriented. I think we're going through a major shift in this country in terms of people who are trained primarily to treat disease, uh, as opposed to people who have as part of their training keeping you healthy and thriving and flourishing and becoming the best possible you. So, is your physician or health practitioner pretty much satisfied if you get your blood pressure controlled with medication and not any major change in your lifestyle? Or is he or she helping you to make changes in your overall lifestyle, quality of life, and your well-being? And there are all kinds of training programs now that provide this for healthcare providers. There are organizations such as American College of Lifestyle Medicine that provides uh, support in these ideas. So, notice, is your practitioner asking you how many times a week you eat red meat, how many times you eat fish? Uh, Are you eating a primarily plant-forward diet? Are you eating junk food? Are you exercising on a regular basis? Are you gradually escalating how much you exercise so that you're not staying stuck at the same level indefinitely? There are a lot of things that you can do to take charge of your health and get you to overtime.
This is really important stuff that I think needs to be taught in schools. I think our health classes need to do a very bigger job, especially when you have to go take health, in high school and in elementary school, that our health is so important to us. We don't put a band-aid on it by getting pharmaceutical drugs, surgeries, different things like that. Let's do it ourselves to take care of ourselves and take care of our body and take care of our mind and everything that you bring by picking up your book, Rejuvenaging, the art and
Thank you.
science of growing older with enthusiasm. So, Dr. Ron, a really good thing. So, if you follow that non-negotiable four your whole life, you're going to make it to overtime and you're going to win in overtime. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if you make it to overtime with a strong body, strong mind, strong social connections, good brain, and you know, good habits, you're probably going to be favored in overtime. And being favored in overtime means that you can live a good long time with a high quality of life, and that beats the alternative any day of the week.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, Dr. Ron. Again, you can check you out, Dr. Ron Kaiser, everywhere. Make sure you go to the Growing Older with Enthusiasm Facebook group and also Growing Older with Enthusiasm on YouTube. Thanks again, Dr. Ron.
Thank you, Neil.
All right. That was the Growing Older with Enthusiasm podcast, guys. Take care.